but a lot of that is also about personal fulfillment, personal achievement, and being happy with what you're doing and finding meaning and purpose in what you're doing yourself. So when I went to study psychology, when I came back to Dublin to study psychology in University College Dublin, and when I went there, I found that there's this amazing sports psychologist lecturing and researching in there, Professor Aidan Moran, and he sadly passed away earlier this year. But he became, I wanted to know more. I wanted to work with him and find out more, and I was really interested suddenly in what can we learn from sports psychology? What can musicians learn? Because I realized there's a huge amount of research in sports psychology. There's a lot of money for research in sports psychology, and there's a lot of research happening and a lot of interest in the psychological side of sport performance. And I was interested to know what can we learn as musicians about effective psychological preparation for performance from sports psychology. And there's a lot we can learn and have learned from sports psychology. But one of the things I realized when I started to do my research was that actually great musicians are using strategies and do actually quite a lot of psychological work in order to prepare for performance. And they already know, maybe instinctively, or they've come across things, or they've read a lot themselves, looked into it themselves. Some people have done a lot of work to find out what they can do to psychologically prepare for performance, and others have just kind of stumbled across strategies that worked for them. And so, yeah, great musicians, expert musicians are using strategies that are very similar to the strategies that are used in sport performance and sports psychology. But there seemed to be a lack of research actually looking at how musicians use these strategies and how they can use them effectively. So musicians are kind of using them, but kind of taking them not knowing how effective it will be. So it's kind of interested in looking at strategies that are used in sport performance and how musicians use them and how we can use them, or how musicians can use them most effectively for themselves. And also, I suppose then, and whilst I was doing research there in UCD, I came across the topic or the concept of flow, or what's called in kind of popular domain, popular culture, we call it being in the zone.
I want to get into that actually as well, about your float state scale as well that you mentioned actually.
Okay, well,
yeah, I'll let you carry on.
Well,
Sorry.
I just kind of happened to come across this idea of flow, and I was immediately fascinated because when I read about it, there was research on it, people knew it existed, and it was something that I had actually experienced a lot myself as a musician, as a performer, but I had never known that there was a name for it. And I didn't know that, you know, how often you were supposed to have it, or if some people had it all the time, and so I was immediately interested to know who's having this experience, how often do they have it, can they make it happen, and do, you know, the great musicians or expert performers, are they having experiences like being in the zone? Are they having those all the time? Is that what makes them a great musician? And so my PhD research then set out to investigate flow, this experience of flow.
I was about to say actually, because that's something I really want to get into actually, about the flow state that you mentioned really well. And obviously in your book, you mentioned a lot about flow. But also even before your book, I remember you've done some journals, one of them being the Journal of Research and Music Education. And I read that actually recently as well, which is absolutely brilliant. And you mentioned things about the 9 items. My pleasure. But within that, you mentioned, honestly, I found it really in-depth and amazing. And within that, I realized you put the 9-item measure of flow, things like clear goals, self-consciousness, measure of action, and so forth. I mean, how long did it take you to complete these measures of flow, and how difficult was it for you to put these together?
Well, when I came to, so this was the first thing I had to do when looking into musicians' experiences of flow, was find out, you know, how do you measure it? How do you find out if somebody's actually having flow? And there was already in the sport literature, in sport research,
Hmm.
uh, somebody had already been doing quite a lot of. Csikszentmihalyi is
Hmm.
the main kind of pioneer of research on flow, and since Csikszentmihalyi, a lot of research has been carried out on flow, but mostly within sport. But it has in other domains as well, but mostly within sport. And Susan Jackson in Australia, she had put together a questionnaire on flow, a scale, a measure, a way of measuring if people have experienced flow. And so I adapted that. So she was looking at it with sports women and men, and I adapted that for musicians. So it didn't need a great deal of work adapting it.
Hmm.
Um, but then had the issue of getting people to actually fill it out, and I wanted to see the students. I wanted to see, because at that time I was interested in seeing what is the relationship between people experiencing flow and people practicing. Do people who practice more experience more flow? Is that what I kind of wondered? Is flow something that propels people to practice more? If
Mm.
you're having this wonderful experience, which maybe I should describe. Should I?
Yeah,
Should I
that'd be brilliant.
describe how musicians describe this experience?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, well, as you were saying, yeah, so when you measure it, you find that there are kind of 9 things that come together. And some of
Mm-hmm.
those are, when people experience flow, there's an amazing sense of control.
Mm-hmm.
It's an altered state of consciousness, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
I should say. So it's a state of consciousness that isn't our usual kind of state of awareness and self-consciousness. And when it comes about, people have this experience of a sense of control where they can do exactly what they want to do and almost feel invincible, like they can do anything. It's a really amazing experience of that. They're completely absorbed. They describe being totally focused, totally in the music, totally absorbed in the music.
Mm.
There's a sense of ease and effortlessness. So they're doing things, even really difficult passages that maybe somebody found really difficult in their practice, and were hopefully managing to execute them well in practice, but actually doing it with ease
Mm.
when they were experiencing flow. There's a merging of what Csikszentmihalyi called a merging of action and awareness, and that's a merging of the mind and body. So people have described, musicians say things like, the instrument was really working for me, or I felt in total harmony with the instrument and with the music. People describe that it just kind of, that everything just clicks into place. Suddenly there's this
Mm-hmm.
feeling that they can do anything, and whatever they want to do, they can do it. So that, the way sometimes our mind and body don't really work together very
Yeah.
well. We have this idea of what we want to do, but it's not really happening. But in flow, the mind and body just work together really well, and every idea that you have, every musical idea, every idea of expression, the execution of really difficult passages, it's just happening. The body does exactly what the mind wants it to do. There's this idea of, there's a feeling of knowing exactly what you want to do and doing it.
Mm.
And there's great feedback, so that if something, say a co-player or somebody else you're playing with, does something different, or makes a mistake even, or they have a new creative idea, that you respond really well to it, and even to your own mistakes, if but there never seems to be any actually in flow. And if there is a mistake, it doesn't matter, because
Mm.
it just becomes part of the phenomenon and part of the experience, and you move on, and the feedback, you respond really well. So there's this lovely feeling of being totally absorbed, being totally in control, doing exactly what you want to do, expressing the music exactly how you want to express it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key features is this loss of self-consciousness that people have described as being very freeing. So there's this feeling of, although you're aware of the audience, you really, and you care, you're still wanting to communicate and express the musical intention. Um, but there's this feeling of that you suddenly that don't care about being judged. You're not concerned about what the criticism or what people will think of you, or,
Yeah.
and musicians have described that as like a really freeing feeling, that so it's totally different from our normal state of consciousness, where we're always aware of kind of other people, and what they'll, especially as musicians, comparing ourselves to other standards of playing and how other people play and other ways of expressing yourself and so on. So it's this, and people describe playing their best when they're in flow, that they've never played so well before, and they don't even need to hear other people tell them that was great, because they just
They
have
just
this
know,
lovely
yeah. Mm.
feeling of that was amazing. I could not have done that better.